Hey guys, it's Jack Cypher, back from the abyss. See what I did there? I'm sorry for a very long, extended hiatus for the second time now. Jesus Christ, I'm getting worse than Tagashi at this. I could give you all the excuses imaginable, could turn the camera around and show you what two kids under the age of 4 does to a person's house, or pop you over to the side and see the massive amount of workload that's on my plate right now. But I can see a light at the end of the tunnel right now, and all I just really wanted to do was sit down and talk about my favorite series of all time, One Piece. So let's cut the bullshit and let's get right into it. Today we're going to be talking about Im-sama, or Imu, or Mu. I really like how they're referring to themselves as Mu these days. Also very potentially Imu Namona, if I'm remembering correctly. We're going to be talking about the different stages that Im has gone through over the course of One Piece. Because Im, I didn't think of much at first. I'm like, oh, this character's a little bit generic and boring. But Im is quite possibly the most mysterious character, and not just the character itself, because it's a center point, the epicenter of all the mysteries in One Piece. And Im is the one that's spearheading it. And I don't think I've seen a series in recent memory that is causing me as much mystery as everything that's regarding Im, everything that's been going on with him in the most recent chapters of One Piece. So there's your spoiler warning. We're going to be talking about everything up until the most recent chapter. I believe it was 1152 off the top of my head. Either way, you'll know. If you don't want to be spoiled, you'll know, and you'll have already clicked off, or not even clicked on it. But let's get right into it. The main thing is going to be what Im is, who Im is, and Im's powers. Because the power side of things, ironically, is what's throwing everything up in the air. But that's enough of an intro, I reckon. Let's get right into it with our first encounter of when we see Im, which is in the Reverie arc, where we see him sit in the empty throne. Now, this meant a lot, the mere gesture of it, and Oda knew that. It's telling us that everything we've known so far up to that point in One Piece has been a lie. We've thought the hierarchy ended with the Gorosei, and then we learned that there was a mysterious being that sat above him. Now, from the first introduction of him, there was so much speculation of who they could be. Were they someone from the Void Century? Were they a god? Were they a vampire or a ghost or a demon, or any metric of different hypothesis on who this person was thrown out there. It was one of the biggest mysteries in One Piece, and still is. But I believe the theory that was run with the most is that they were a being from the Void Century, one of the original 20 families, who was the mastermind, the villain behind everything in the Void Century, and somehow gained eternal life. We thought that I don't think there were many people thinking Im was, someone that appeared 100 years ago, or was like a hierarchy in possession. That's important later. In progression, where they had a father or mother, and then their parents had a parent, and it's been a continued royal line going down. I think most people have assumed that it's just one person, one overlord, if you want to say that. And I think the most common hypothesis, I'm going to get that word wrong a lot in this video, was that the immortal surgeon technique was used on Im, and that's what's made them immortal, and they've ruled ever since. We imagined that they had some super powerful ability that could keep the Gorosei and the rest of the world in check. Now, where I would say we start diverging from that initial theory is when we start to learn about Nefertari D. Lily. We get introduced to her in Reverie as well, but much later on in a flashback where Cobra interacts with Eam. And from that interaction, lots of people wanted to run with the idea that Eam or Mu, I really should start going with Mu, I really like that name for them, that Mu was Nefertari D. Lily. And it's not a bad take. Everything is pointing to that, and I still think that can be true, and we're going to get into that in a second. But that's where we started to get a more concrete idea of what Mu might be. We also found out that in the Void Century, one of the 20 founding families, one of the kings was Emu Namona. Now, that throws a wrench in the person being Lily. But it's Oda. It's more complicated than that. It's never as transparent or as easy as what he leads us to believe. At current day One Piece in Egghead, I was going to say Egghead, in Elbath, we find out that Mu is quite possibly more of the demon god root of things rather than a person. They grow demon wings, they're possessing people, they have satanic circles, ritual circles, they have grimoires. Literally, I got a lot of flashbacks to Black Clover. I forget the demon's name, Zargard or something along those lines. Correct me in the comments. With the speech magic, where he just comes out of nowhere and is we didn't even know demons were like a thing really. And he comes out of nowhere as the big bad of that arc and introduces us to the world of demons. That's kind of what Eam is treading down the path as. And I'm seeing a lot of speculation online about, is he a demon or a god that was mentioned in the mural that was found on Elbath about all the drawings of all the different, the 3 stages of the world. Now that has to be a video in and of itself. I don't want to touch on it too much just because this is going to become like an hour and a half video then. It's already going to go on the long side. And I'm thinking about it, and I'm thinking of whether or not I agree with that speculation that they are a demon. And for right now, I am going with I'm actually still in the camp that this is a being from the Void Century. At the very, very most, it's a being from the Void Century that is being possessed by a higher power. But I believe that the vessel, if we want to call it that, of Mu's real body didn't exist in the first primordial world. It was only in the second world, yet the being that's controlling them may be from the first. And we'll get into that in a little bit, and we'll debate which theory is more likely. But I want to get right into their powers, because their powers actually is what throws everything into question. And I reckon it's an interesting way Oda's done that, because it's usually through dialogue and through exposition that we find out who and what someone is. But Oda seems to be showing us this through the demonstration of powers and how inconsistent they are, let's say. And I think that's done deliberately. I don't think that's an error on Oda's writing abilities. But we know that I'm going to say that there's now 3 groups of people that serve Mu directly. There's the Gorosei, there's the God Knights, Jack, put your hand on screen, and there is the giants that Mu just turned into their own thralls, their own demons, their soldiers. And each of them have different varying degrees of immortality slash demonness, dark energy, dark power type of abilities. We have the Gorosei that seem to not be immortal, not die, but also be eternally, well, not young in that case, but not age. We know that they've at least Jake Saturn, before he met his untimely end in Egghead, was alive for 300 years because we saw him in a flashback. So we know they don't age. But do they? Hear me out. We'll get to that in a second. Then we have the God's Knights that seem to have the same level of regeneration as the Gorosei, maybe a little bit weaker, but still they can regenerate from mortal injuries. But even though they can regenerate like the Gorosei, they aren't immortal like the Gorosei. We know this because Garling, the new chief of science, the god of science, we see him as a young man in God's Valley, and he ages to become an old man. Now, he might have reached that level of eternally youthfully. That's really biting us in the ass there. He might have gained the ability of not aging now that he's taken Saturn's spot. There's lots of theories of whether or not Saturn's, spider demon powers transfer to Garling, or if Garling has new powers, or he's just his own powers. There's lots of speculation on that, but I reckon it's correct to believe that he now is not going to be aging. And then there is the giants that Mu just 2-3 chapters ago turned into demons to serve Mu's purpose. These demons are different than the God's Knights and the Gorosei. One, they physically are transformed. They have wings and devil horns, and they get, devil tridents and stuff like that. And they seem very much different than the God's Knights. They also seem more slavish or thrallish, if you want to give it that. The God's Knights seem to have more of a will of their own, even though we have seen that their individuality hasn't been completely taken, the giants, that is. But it seems to be a different level of power that they were given compared to the God's Knights and Gorosei. And this has thrown everything up in the air, because what is Mu really doing here? We've seen Mu change its form into some demonic beast, like some big blob of energy down in Castle Pangaea. We've seen Mu turn physically into a demon. We've seen Mu possess people and use teleportation circles. We've seen Mu summon, of all things, cannons and a dagger and a massive-ass double-barreled sort of shotgun. We've seen Mu grant immortality. We've seen Mu take life away. We've seen Mu turn people into slaves. A very wide range of powers that is getting harder and harder to believe that it's just from one devil fruit. Now, Mu, one thing I just said there that I want to touch on now before I forget. When Mu transformed the giants into servants, into slaves, they mentioned that the giants needed to sacrifice some of their life force to achieve this goal, which is a little bit counterintuitive of the immortality that Mu is promising. Does this mean that, let's say that this is the same as the God's Knights, because obviously it shouldn't be the Gorosei because they don't age. So why would their life force being taken really mean anything? Unless it's just specifically so Ian can take it away at the snap of his fingers. But it could mean that the God's Knights just are going to die much younger than other people their age in exchange for the massive increase in power. Or it could be entirely just separated to the giants, which for right now I'm going down that line of theory because I find it odd that we've never seen any of the God's Knights demonstrate any of the power that Eam has given the giants. None of the horns or tridents or anything like that, the wings. Because we know that Summers was fighting Scopper Gabon, and he got easily manhandled there. And you would think to get any sort of, semblance of an upper hand on Scopper that he would have activated those powers to try and help him out. So I think it's three different stages of power Mu has passed on to all of them. You would think that it's non-aging, the aging but immortal, and then just the increase in destructive power with immortality type of thing. But is that true? Do the Gorosei not age? And does Mu themselves not age? And you might be wondering, Jack, what are you talking about? You've just spent 20 minutes going over the fact that they don't age. But we've also just found out in the most recent chapter that it appears that Elbath works in a different time zone, if you will. That time on Elbath works slower than it does in the Blue Seas, in the New World, in the One Piece world. And that led me thinking, we know that if this is true, which I very much think that it is, that Elbath is working on a different time zone, because the warning that Louis gave, I forget his last name, I believe his first name was Louis, the explorer gave us, was that, Elbath is a wonderful place, but don't dwell here too long. And that's starting to make sense now if their time works differently, because your loved ones back in your home and stuff like that are going to be aging while you are stuck on Elbath not aging like they are. And it could be very easy to lose the family and connections that you had in the real world. The real world, for a lack of a better term. So it makes sense now why he's given that warning. I mean, could he not have just written that in the book? I suppose to speak in his defense, that maybe if he wrote that down, it would be too tempting. People would be too much wanting to go there to make their lives last longer. But we speculate that this is done through the power of Yggdrasil. I know it's not called that, but you know what I mean. It's Yggdrasil, the Atom Tree. And that's what got me thinking. The Atom Tree is causing time to work differently. There is another tree like that. The Tree of Eve, the Eve Tree, down in Fishman Island. And what does that happen to be below? Happens to be below the red line. And what sits upon the red line? Marie Joie. More specifically, the Castle of Pangaea and the Room of Authority. What happens if somehow and this could be through the technology advancements that were in the times before this current time, they've been able to compress Pangaea Castle and the Room of Authority specifically into a time bubble, kind of like a fairy tale reference for you, Fairy Sphere, was it? Fairy Lore, Fairy Glitter, the one that traps them on Tenro Island and doesn't age them. What happens if we're doing something like this here? That the Gorosei isn't that they don't age, it's that they just don't age in the Room of Authority. Same with Mu. And you might be thinking, Jack, that's a stretch. Like, there's been no evidence to make us think that. You're barking up the wrong tree. Pun intended. But the reason why I'm thinking that, and why I think it might be a good narrative device, is because it ties up a big plot hole, potentially, on why the Gorosei and why Mu stay in Pangaea Castle. We always see the Gorosei in the Room of Authority. Why don't they ever go anywhere else to have their meetings? It's not like that room specifically has anything of value in it. They literally sit behind a minimalist table with nothing on it. I never see them eating food or anything along those lines. Which brings up an interesting point, that when we see Saturn going over to Egghead, he's eating a feast. Don't you find that interesting that while he's he's out of Marie Joie, or specifically Pangea Castle, the Room of Authority, we see scenes of him eating? And I think there's more than one scene as well of him eating. Could that potentially be because he's no longer there? He actually needs sustenance. He needs to be able to give his body what it needs to sustain itself. Because one other argument for why I think something like this might be going on is that how come all the Gorosei are old men? Except for Drew Peters, of course. He is on the older side still, but obviously not as old. I find that odd that, it could just be Oda being unique and creative, but that the men that helped Mu the most, Mu's trusted, most close confidants, are all old men. So does Mu just have them serve him all the way up until they get to a certain age where they're like, you have sufficiently proved yourself to become my most trusted advisor. Well, not advisor, they don't advise him, but my most trusted servant, and you can achieve the rank of Gorosei. It's an interesting theory, and I find it hard to believe that this has happened always at the stages of elderly. Because if you look at the Gods Knights, a lot of them are more on the younger side. And you would think that the younger you are, the stronger you are. Yes, Mu's turning them into immortal beings, but you would still want them to be as strong as possible. So you'd think it would be better to... We know that in One Piece, the peak age is between 35 to 50 is when characters usually hit their peak. You would think that Mu would want to make them immortal at that age. And that's why I'm thinking, what happens if he did? What happens if Mu gave them immortality and eternal youth back when they were, silly Jack, it's not eternal youth with this theory, but gave them immortality when they were younger and gave them permission to be in the Room of Authority and live there to wane off the aging and get them at their peak performance. And the reason why they're so old is because that is the time that they needed to leave the castle and to accomplish the goals that they could only accomplish at their level of authority and strength. It's just a thought, but it's something that I'm really kind of leading towards. The same thing with Mu. What happens if Mu can't leave the dwellings of his castle because he's so old that being out of the non-aging sphere is going to kill him? Or them, sorry. I know I'm going back and forth between it all. That would make much more sense of why they needed to possess another person in Gunko, in this example, one of the Gods Knights on Elbath. It's food for thought, I guess you could say. It would also make more sense if this was the case. If we do go down this line of thinking, then I would say that Mu definitely isn't some sort of demon god or just god itself, that they are just some super powerful person. I'm not necessarily saying that this human, that they might not be a human, but non-divine entity, let's say they are a human, I'm not necessarily excluding the fact that that human could be possessing other people. Maybe it's a little bit of an Orochimaru situation where they try to possess other people to also ward off aging. That aging is the thing that they fear, dying, death. But that's just... You know what? We'll touch on one more thing about Mu's character before just finishing off another aspect of his powers. The reason why I don't think that he's one of those big calamity gods or anything like that is because when Mu is upset, visibly upset, we see this on Elbath, he's always upset with Joy Boy. Joy Boy seems to be the person that he hates the most. If we went down this line of thinking that he was some all-powerful god, then I imagine he's existed since the First Age, and I wonder why he doesn't, scorn any of the other, like Nika himself, the sun god himself, before it became a devil fruit power. Why isn't we see him raging of, oh, that sun god Nika, he's ruined everything. Why is it Joy Boy specifically that we see? And that's always, we know that Joy Boy is from the Second Age and the Void Century. Just food for thought with it all. But let's explore his powers a little bit more, because it's so wide ranging that is this all, I'm trying to pick my words carefully here. Is this all due to a devil fruit? Is this due to the species of what Mu is? Or the third option, is he some all-powerful god? Right now, I'm leading actually between, I know he's demonstrating a lot of godly, just unheard of powers. Right now, I'm actually thinking it's a mix of species and devil fruit. Now, they very much could potentially have the devil fruit, the demon fruit, and actually be a demon through the process of the devil fruit. Or it could be a devil fruit that's the opposite of the sun god Nika fruit. What happens if it holds the powers in it, one of the other gods that is mentioned on the mural, and that's where their power is coming from, and why they might be a good, rival opposite to Luffy having the sun god fruit. Also, another theory that I had is that what happens if Mu actually has the first ever devil fruit? We know that devil fruits are created out of people's desires. What happens that if Mu, when they existed in the Void Century, had a tragic backstory? This is Oda. Mu most certainly has a tragic backstory in my mind. I don't think that they're just evil incarnate for the sake of being evil, that they were born this way and that's what they are. What happens if Mu, back in the Void Century, saw all the tragedies that was going on? Because we know that the ancient kingdom wasn't just some joyful place. I'm not saying that Joy Boy wasn't just a straight good guy, but we know that a lot of slavery was going on and that a lot of unfair treatment was going on. What happens if Mu was seeing how people were being treated, maybe had people close to them be killed or hurt or put into slavery? And I'm going to actually do another fairy tale reference here. What happens if it's something like Zareth, where I remember he has a line of, if this world continues to reject me, then I'm going to reject the world. It was a very, very badass saying that Zareth had. I wonder if it was something like that, where Mu, in the bitterness and despair of it all, just had this desire to crush the what's the right word here? The policy, the government, the rule, the regimen, the rules that were going on in this world. He just wanted it gone and crushed and destroyed. And through those negative desires of wanting to combat the unfairness of it all, it bred and brought forth the first devil fruit that reflected those negative feelings and emotions. Like this demon type of power that Mu has access to. Could be something along those lines. Lastly, it could be a species thing, or a type of sub form of a human. And if it is this, if he's not just a demon, because that could also possibly be a thing. We know the Lunarians were considered gods. Maybe Mu was considered a race that was considered the demons. This can actually be mutually exclusive as well, the line of thinking I was going down. Because I think if Mu isn't just a normal human, or not a god or anything like that, if he's just an odd human, I really, really think Mu has the same thing going on as Blackbeard does. The reason I say that is because we know that Mu had pictures of Vivi, Shirahoshi, Luffy, and Blackbeard. And I found that really odd that it was specifically Luffy and Blackbeard. Because it's not just because they have the Will of D. That's what we were thinking to begin with. But looking into it more, why wouldn't Mu have a wanted poster of Monkey D. Dragon? He's got the D in his name, and he's literally spearheading the organization that wants to overthrow Mu. If it's just the D initial, there's no possible way he isn't looking at Dragon as the main threat. But it's Luffy and Blackbeard. I wonder why. Luffy, we have more information on now and know why. It's because of the devil fruit that he possesses, the sun god Nika fruit, the same one that Joy Boy has. So it's obvious that Mu's looking at that as a supreme threat that really needs to be taken care of. Then there's Blackbeard. It can't be because of the devil fruits that he had. We know it's the Yami, unless the Yami Yami fruit isn't the Yami Yami fruit, the same situation as Luffy. It is odd that he can't become intangible like the other Logia fruits, so maybe it's not a Logia fruit and that it is a Zoan fruit as well. Food for thought there. That could be something going on there. But it could be what Blackbeard is, because we know Blackbeard has a weird body. He doesn't sleep. They get Shanks and Buggy and stuff get odd vibes on him. His personality seems to shift and change depending on the scenario that we see him in. Of course, it's way, like what is it, like 17 years ago or something now, where we see the scene in Jaya about Luffy and Zoro being like, Nami, it's not him, it's they, which led to so much speculation of Blackbeard being multiple different people in one body. I think if Mu is a different type of person that's still humanoid and not just a demon race, that this is what they share in common with Blackbeard, and that is why he has Blackbeard's wanted poster, because they have a similar physiology and Blackbeard might have the same potential that Mu has. Now, it could be multiple personalities as well. Maybe that has something to do with Lily. Because the main thing going against Aim being Lily is the fact that we know Lily had a big part to play in the poneglyphs being spread into the world. And we know that Aim got visibly upset about Cobra mentioning Lily as a D, which wouldn't make sense if they were Lily themselves. I feel really confident that Mu is not Lily D. Nefertari in her right mind. I do think there's a strong possibility that he's in Lily's body, because that would explain why Lily never came back to Alabasta or what happened to her. But I don't believe it is Lily herself, unless the multiple personalities, maybe Mu has a good personality of Lily. Maybe Mu has a good personality like Lily, a bad personality like the one we're seeing on every other appearance of Mu, or he has like a neutral personality where he doesn't really care, a nihilistic, slothful type of view on it all. And that's why he doesn't get involved with things. He just sits back and lets the world progress. It's just something to consider. I am leaning behind the fact that it's one of those situations, and he's not just some grand god architect of just absolute power. And I really want you guys to let me know down in the comments what you're thinking of it all. What type of line of thinking are you going down? Is he a god? Is he something that I've suggested? Is he something that I haven't even touched on before and I'm completely overlooking? I'd be really, really interested in finding out what you all have to think on it. But for right now, I'm going to wrap this video up here. I really want to talk about Loki. I want to talk about the mural. I want to talk about Gunko and Shamrock and the other Gods Knights. So let me know down in the comments if that's something you guys are really interested in hearing. But for right now, it's been a distinct pleasure to be back and being able to do this again. I'm really hoping that it lasts. like I said in the beginning, I think there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and this can be something that I continuously do and not get sidetracked, because it's not a love of doing it. I really do enjoy this and do find it therapeutic to get all these thoughts out and to be able to have these discussions with you down in the comments. But for right now, I've been Jack Cypher. Have a lovely day, people. Cheers.